The war did not reach the United States with a warning. It arrived in fire and smoke, in a single morning that shattered the illusion that distance could protect a nation from a world already in flames. In that moment, history shifted. What had been a distant catastrophe became an American war, and the consequences would reshape the global balance of power forever. Before that morning, the United States stood at an uneasy crossroads. Europe and Asia were already consumed by violence, yet America remained formally outside the conflict. This distance was not indifferent, but caution was shaped by memory. The First World War had left deep scars, political, economic, and psychological. Many Americans believed another foreign war would only repeat old mistakes. But while the nation debated, the world continued to burn. Industrial economies transformed into engines of war, empires rose and fell, and the United States, whether it admitted it or not, was being pulled steadily toward the center of the storm. When Japanese aircraft struck the naval base at Pearl Harbor, the illusion of safety collapsed instantly. Battleships burned in shallow water. Aircraft were destroyed before they could leave the ground. Hundreds of lives were lost in hours. The attack did more than damage a fleet. It erased hesitation. Days later, Germany declared war on the United States, transforming separate regional conflicts into a single global struggle. America was no longer watching history unfold. It was inside it. President Franklin Roosevelt responded with urgency, calling for an expansion of military power on a scale never before attempted. But the challenge was immense. For 2 decades, the armed forces had been neglected, treated as an afterthought in a nation focused on economic survival and domestic recovery. Training facilities were inadequate, equipment was outdated or non-existent, entire units existed only on paper. The United States possessed industrial potential, but translating that potential into combat power would take time. Time the war did not allow. As Japanese forces advanced rapidly across the Pacific, American garrisons fell one by one. These early defeats exposed harsh realities. The war would not be short, victory would not be cheap, and preparation could not be rushed without cost. In Washington, military leaders worked relentlessly to build a command structure capable of directing a conflict that spanned oceans and continents. Coordination became essential. Strategy could no longer be fragmented. Out of necessity, a unified system emerged to advise the president and align American plans with those of its allies. At the same time, the Army itself was transformed. Its structure was reorganized, dividing responsibilities between air power, ground forces, and logistical support. The goal was mobility, speed, and flexibility, qualities demanded by modern warfare. Traditional formations inherited from earlier conflicts were reshaped into lighter, more maneuverable units. New types of divisions were developed, including armored and airborne forces designed for rapid movement and decisive action. But these changes came with trade-offs. Limited shipping capacity forced painful compromises. Units were streamlined, sometimes at the expense of endurance and firepower. Everything was scarce. Training space, housing, weapons, vehicles. Industry was asked to do the impossible, equip a rapidly expanding American military while also supplying allies already fighting for survival. Factories worked around the clock. Ships crossed dangerous seas, carrying tanks, trucks, aircraft, and ammunition. This flow of material became a lifeline, not only for Britain, but also for the Soviet Union, where mechanized warfare demanded enormous resources. While ground forces struggled to prepare, air power became the primary means of striking back. Allied bombers carried the war to enemy territory long before American infantry set foot on European soil. These early missions were costly and imperfect, but they signaled a critical shift. The United States was learning how to fight a global war while still building the tools required to win it. Strategic disagreements soon emerged among the Allies. American leaders favored a direct confrontation in Western Europe, believing speed and concentration were essential. British leaders, shaped by the trauma of trench warfare decades earlier, urged caution. They preferred to weaken enemy forces along the edges of the empire before risking a decisive invasion. The debate was intense, but compromise prevailed. A new plan took shape, an invasion of North Africa that would test American forces while striking at enemy positions in the Mediterranean. Executing that plan demanded improvisation on an unprecedented scale. Soldiers trained hastily for amphibious landings. Civilian ships were converted for military use. Commanders were appointed, alliances negotiated, and political uncertainty navigated alongside military risk. When Allied forces landed on the North African coast, resistance was uneven but real. The campaign revealed both promise and weakness. Coordination improved, experience accumulated, but so did mistakes. The real test came when American forces faced seasoned German units in open combat. In the rugged terrain of Tunisia, early engagements exposed critical flaws. Units were spread too thin. Communication failed. Armor proved inferior to enemy tanks. Entire battalions were overwhelmed. Losses mounted quickly, and morale faltered. It was a brutal awakening. This was not training. This was a war against an enemy who mastered it. Yet defeat did not bring collapse. Reinforcements arrived. Command structures changed. Leadership was replaced where necessary. Allied forces adapted under pressure, learning to fight as integrated teams rather than isolated elements. Artillery, in particular, emerged as a decisive advantage, accurate, responsive, and devastating when properly employed. Slowly, the balance shifted. As Allied armies closed in from multiple directions, Axis forces were compressed into a shrinking pocket. The final battles were intense but inevitable. When resistance ended, hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers laid down their arms. North Africa was secured. The victory was costly, imperfect, and hard-earned, but it mattered. The lessons learned there would shape every campaign that followed. Training became more realistic, leadership more flexible, coordination more disciplined. The United States Army emerged from North Africa battered but transformed, no longer untested, no longer naive. It had learned, through failure and blood, how modern war was fought. America's entry into the war did not begin with triumph. It began with shock, confusion, and painful adjustment. But from that chaos emerged a force capable of sustaining a global struggle. The war would continue for years, across continents and oceans, demanding unimaginable sacrifice. Yet the path forward was now clear. The United States had crossed a threshold, and the world would never be the same.